want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
L'entrepreneuriat digital vous intéresse-t-il? Vous voulez apprendre à construire des projets digitaux? Aimeriez-vous gagner des revenus passifs conséquents en tout lieu? Voici la plateforme des professionnels du digital, la Diaspo Academy. Ici, vous retrouverez les meilleurs professionnels de la diasporama mondiale connectés sur notre plateforme. Vous allez pouvoir acquérir des formations adéquates qui feront de vous des entrepreneurs digitaux compétents. Étudiants, entrepreneurs, coachs, instructeurs et entreprises, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Elle vous offre la possibilité de suivre votre formation en mode virtuel à partir de chez vous, où que vous soyez sur la planète. Toutes nos formations disponibles en ligne sont dispensées de manière interactive. Il suffit de vous inscrire et vous pourrez les suivre depuis chez vous. Au cours de la formation, vous passerez des quiz et examens selon votre parcours. En outre, à partir de votre tableau de bord, vous suivrez vos performances et progressions. Vous pourrez aussi communiquer avec vos instructeurs et recevoir des notifications. À la fin de votre parcours de formation, vous recevrez un certificat Diaspo Academy Certified. Que vous soyez débutant ou responsable d'entreprise, Diaspo Academy est une opportunité pour vous. Saisissez-la! Enfin, que vous soyez coach ou instructeur, ayez accès à 1 millier d'étudiants à travers notre plateforme. Merci de choisir Diaspo Academy, le meilleur choix. Pour plus d'informations, allez sur www.diaspoacademy.com. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.
En vue de performer vos compétences et intégrer l'espace de l'entrepreneuriat digital, la nouvelle chambre de commerce nationale et la nouvelle chambre de commerce USA-RDC, en partenariat avec Diaspo Academy, installée aux États-Unis d'Amérique, vous offre des sessions de formation en entrepreneuriat digital à des coûts réduits. Ces formations vous permettront d'intégrer le monde numérique et améliorer vos compétences en digital au bénéfice de cette terre d'avenir et grand marché qu'est la République démocratique du Congo. Pour participer aux formations, envoyez vos contacts WhatsApp au plus 243 99 073 0795. Enregistrez-vous aujourd'hui car les places sont limitées. Diaspo Academy, la plateforme des professionnels du digital.
Do you want to promote your business? Do you want to talk about your nonprofit organization? Do you want to talk about your culture? Introducing the online web TV, Afrique Today. Fogham, where you can watch us live at the same time on 4 platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and using the Afrique Today app. Download our app today for Android or Apple. Promote your business today. For more information, go to www.afriquetoday.com. Afrique Today, the best of digital TV.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Afrique Today, your #1 TV station out of Washington, D.C. I am your host, Busi Matsiko Anden, presenting the African Diaspora Grassroots Voting. And today we're going to have an amazing time with an amazing thought leader who is going to encourage us to speak about why we should vote, especially in this important election. Anyway, did you know that we are on 4 platforms? We are on AfriqueToday.com, YouTube, Twitter, as well as Facebook. Did you know that we're on Smart TV? Yes, we are. Stay tuned. Welcome, everyone. As I said, I am your host, Busi Matsiko Anden, and today we're going to have an amazing time with an amazing thought leader, Derrick Ashong, someone who I've known for several years, who's started off as a musician, but is now a technology entrepreneur. Derrick is a 3-time nominated producer, and he has worked with the likes of Oprah Winfrey and Steven Spielberg. He will go into those details. Welcome, Derrick.
Thank you, Lucy. You're making me blush.
Wow. And those are your accomplishments. Anyway, Derrick, just tell us more about your career and where you are today.
Okay, great. Thanks. So, I started off, as you mentioned, as a musician. I play guitar, bass, keyboard, write, MC, arrange, produce, the whole 9, from thought to recording. And at the same time, I was always very interested in the business of what we were doing artistically. And so I would work not only on the music or the recording, but how are we going to distribute? How are we going to, do our various partnerships? And that led me into going into business development for a very well-established music producer, a guy named Dave Stewart, who you'll know from the Eurythmics. Sweet dreams are made of these, all of that good stuff. And I wound up learning about a lot of the industry from the other side of the equation. That led me into consulting with other big ventures, Visa, Nokia, MySpace when it was hot, Interscope, all these different companies as part of my work with Dave Stewart. And then I got recruited to work with Oprah, and I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of luminaries in the field, as you mentioned, and with some big media networks, always with a view for how do you think about interactivity and like the future of technology and entertainment. So at the end of the day, I wound up scaling media assets to, 300 million households around the world.
Wow.
And realized we don't really know who's watching. And I wanted to solve for that. So I got with some friends I knew from Google and from university, and we basically built a technology solution that would help content owners to build a direct relationship with content consumers.
Amazing.
And that is AMP Global.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, we'll go into that as the show progresses. I mean, these are interesting times. The pandemic has highlighted the differences and the inequities with regards to people of color. And what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, these in iniquities and sort of imbalances in American life have been there from the very beginning. And the saddest part to me is that most Americans don't want or refuse to acknowledge the realities of what happens in our own society. And because of that, we have been extremely slow in addressing those problems and really finding ways to bring all Americans into the fold to benefit from, this American dream as it's discussed. So what happens is every time there's a crisis, the most vulnerable people are hurt the worst. And American society tends to have an attitude of blaming the victim. Like, oh, you guys didn't make it because you weren't good enough, you didn't work hard enough, you didn't deserve blah, 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 rather than ever addressing the systemic barriers to success for so many people. And I'm not just talking about Black people. We're talking about Latinos. We're talking about Native Americans. We're talking about
Native
women.
Americans.
We're talking about
Yeah.
people with disabilities. We're talking about all kinds of people of lower socioeconomic status. So this crisis just reveals the weaknesses that were already there in society. And the question is, do Americans want to do anything about it?
That's so true. I mean, we've seen the inequities we've seen the inequities in healthcare. We've seen it in justice and policing. I mean, it's been insane,
That's right.
And one of the things I've been thinking about when you were coming on, I was like, you know what? Derrick has always been that luminary in music space, but you've also lent your voice like others such as Harry Belafonte before you, who was an advisor to Martin Luther King Jr. So there's always been a correlation between artists and
That's right.
and campaigns, movements. Just like you also had Miriam Makeba, Hugh Masekela, Lucky Dube,
Fela Kuti.
with regard, Fela Kuti. I mean,
Yes.
who, Alpha Blondie, and all the
Yes.
likes who have been. So you, as Derrick, you started off in the hip hop era, and how does it tie into today's world?
Yo, that's a very interesting question. I mean, hip hop has been political from jump. Somebody was asking me this question the other day, and they're like, well, doesn't rap get, pigeonholed into violence and misogyny? But it seems like it also has a social voice. And I was like, rap and hip hop is not necessarily referring to the same thing. So, for example, rap music is one aspect of broader hip hop culture. Hip hop culture embraces multiple elements. There's the MC, DJ, break dancers, b-boys, b-girls. There's the whole element of graffiti art. I mean, it is a cultural movement. And I think that's part of why it's become so powerful around the world, because it's been a way of expression for people who may not have had access to all the resources of the world, but who had talent and who had community and were willing to build on that. And what you find, I remember when I was in graduate school, I was doing this study on the rise of, nihilism, explicit violence, and misogyny in hip hop culture and in the music in particular. And one of the most interesting things I saw is that you could find a direct correlation in the rise of this sort of nihilistic ideas where, it's all about negativity towards our own communities. We're not talking about other people's communities. We're talking about our own people.
Our own people, yes.
You could see a direct correlation in the rise of that kind of nihilism and the acquisitions of the major labels by the independent labels.
Research? When did you do this
research? I did this in the early 2000s. This is like 2003, 2004. So I was mostly focusing on what was happening in the late 80s into the 90s.
Yes, but isn't it amazing that it's now, like, fast forward how many years later, it's kind of like prophetic into the future?
Oh, well, I mean, it was crazy because it's like, we have this saying in Ghana, Sankofa, you must look to your past to
Mhm.
understand your present
Yes.
and direct your future. So I'm looking retroactively to understand,
Mhm.
this is why the music is this way. What does that mean for where we go? And the interesting thing is, there's a direct correlation between the rise of nihilism, misogyny, anti-blackness in our own black music in hip hop,
Mhm.
and the acquisition of the independent labels by the major labels. And what wound up happening is, as these big companies that are predominantly not run by people of color were like, how do I sell? They were like,
Yes.
well, sex, violence, that works. And they will only sign the artists who said that or
Ah.
who reinforce those ideas. So when you look before, when hip hop was run by independent labels, you got Public Enemy, they're super political. You get De La Soul, they're like on that jazzy tip. You got Tribe Called Quest and the rest of the Native Tongues posse, along with De La, and they're like just pushing the envelope on the music and the sound.
Mhm.
You still have NWA and them with the more gangster vibe, but you had Eric B and Rakim just taking lyricism to new heights. There's a breadth of expression. Run DMC, pioneers in the game.
Yes.
Once it got bought out, it's like, do you carry
It's
guns?
been
Do you have
diluted.
girls with big boobs? Because that's what we can sell to the suburbs.
They've
And at that time,
sexualized it.
60-70% of the music was bought by white kids, not by us. So who's selling what to whom?
Hmm. Interesting. Wow, 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 wow. Very, that's an interesting way of looking at it, giving us an insight on the history of that hip hop movement into the future. Because sometimes you need to know your past to know the future, to
Right.
work out the future.
Exactly.
I mean, and before I even go into this, is a voting show where we're encouraging diasporans to vote, and diasporans are anyone, people of color, and that kind of thing, who in the Americas at the moment for us in our context. And because I believe it's very important that we vote regardless. But before we segue into that, I want to say that there has been anger at this machine. Some people have decided, I'm not voting. You have someone who's like a Bernie Sanders person saying, you know what, I'm not voting for Biden because my person did not win. Oh, someone is a whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or support the Green Party, you need to vote. It's important. It's practicing your civil duty.
Yes.
And for me, I thought that, you know what, you are an interesting personality in that you also appeal to the youth
Hmm.
through your personality, but also the stuff you do, the technology stuff you do with I mean, you now have the Take Back the Mic campaign, as well as being a musician. So what do you think of, give me your perspective on this.
Okay. So
I know it's very loaded.
I no, but it's real. I mean, you're asking the right questions. We're talking about the right issues. This idea of like the candidate doesn't represent everything that I am wanting, everything I believe in, is not a
Mhm,
perfect replica of my own self, is
mhm.
nonsense. It is
Absolutely.
illustrative of a lack of political sophistication, because at the end of the day, politics is a power game.
Mhm.
So your opponents are always looking for what is the best way to disenfranchise you, disengage you, connect you from any method that could actually achieve your interests, if they believe that your interests are not necessarily in alignment with theirs.
Mhm.
So there's always going to be somebody telling you like, "Hey, yo, Bernie is Democratic Socialist Santa. He's going to come up in here, free healthcare,
The
you got it.
boogeyman.
Free school, you got it. Yeah, whatever you want. He's the
Mhm.
candy man. Whatever you like, you need, you got it.
Mhm.
How are we going
Mhm.
to pay for it? We'll work around it. We'll talk about that
We'll
later."
work around it.
And then you look at somebody who's had, no disrespect to the Sanders clan and crew, and I'm not here to create beef within the progressive movement,
Mhm.
but I also want to
Mhm.
be very transparent.
Yes, you have to
Like, Bernie
be
Sanders doesn't have a
transparent.
record of deep accomplishment in the Senate.
Mhm.
So now you're telling me that, oh, you don't want to vote for him because the Democratic establishment didn't support Bernie, who was like your guy. But I'm like, Bernie is still to this day not a Democrat. So Joe Biden appealed to
Hmm.
Democrats in the
Yes.
Democratic primary. makes a lot of logical sense. They've got him on board. Now you have the folks who are like, well, I might vote for the Greens. Some of them like, well, they might vote for Trump. And you know that those people were never serious about the movement in the first place, because the way in which you get change is
The
incremental.
independence.
It doesn't mean that, yeah, I mean, you don't, it doesn't mean you don't go for like big things, but you take your wins as you get them, right? Imagine
Absolutely.
you were playing baseball, for example, since we're talking about
Mhm.
American politics, and
Mhm.
you hit a base hit, not a home run, base hit. Would you say, oh man, I'm only going to get to first base. Maybe I only get to second base. I didn't get a home run, so I'm not going to run? It's nonsense. You get that base hit, somebody else comes in, they score another base hit. You got somebody at 1 and 2, third guy comes in, knocks it out of the park.
Mhm.
Everybody makes it home. That's how progress is made. You take the wins where you can get them. And I've heard from some people this idea that, well, you know, the system is rigged, and you know what I'm saying, the Republicans and the Democrats are all the same. Brethren, sistren, they're not the same. It's obvious. If people didn't see it before, you can certainly see it now. I remember the 2000 election, some people didn't want to vote for Al Gore because he wasn't interesting, he was not sexy. They just stuck it out. A few hundred people decided the election in Florida. Now we come to the 2010 election. Forget the main presidential, the midterms.
We are
We
very
all wound
casual
up,
about it.
got Obama in, right? Now here comes 2010, and everyone's like, oh, well, I don't know. Obama didn't bring all the ice cream yet. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm going to really vote. It's not even a presidential election. The Republicans took over the Congress, and now life gets difficult.
And
Then you come to
becomes a lame
2016.
duck president. He became a lame duck president.
I mean, he still got a lot of amazing stuff done.
Yes, yes.
But we had a majority. We had a super majority in the House and the Senate to start. And we had a strong majority in the House, and we had the White House. There was so much progressive stuff that could be done if we took a long-term view of we want to work on this for 4 to 8 years. Not, you just got in, you didn't bring ice cream, why should I vote for you? And that's where we get to today. You know, when I was growing up, I couldn't vote. I was not a U.S. citizen. I'm a Ghanaian citizen. Oh,
Yes.
I'm a U.S. citizen now. But at the
Now.
time, I was a Ghanaian citizen.
Congratulations.
Right? And I
Yeah.
thank you. I'm very happy for my papers. Of course, you can't
Me
travel
too.
anywhere with your
This is
passport
also going to
anymore.
be. This is also going to be
Whole
my
other story.
first election. This is going to be my first election to vote. General election to vote.
Yo, can I tell you? First of all, congratulations. That's big.
Thank you.
My first election was the 2000 election. And I was like,
Wow.
this nonsense happened where the guy who got less votes was still installed. If that went down in Nigeria or Zimbabwe, what would the American public be saying? What would the State Department have to say? Now we have all kinds of anti-democratic processes and occurrences in our society. And we're like, well, it just happens. And you wonder, how could that be? And yet you look at the history of the country and you ask, when was America truly a democracy for all Americans?
Interesting.
And it's never been. Right? And so it's not surprising that if you lay your foundation so weakly and then you market and promote it very well, the Constitution, law and order, but it doesn't apply to everybody, and then somebody comes in who's not willing to do the dance and say all the right words, they just want the power. And now you realize that you built the castle on sand, that the structures are not as strong as you thought. And now Americans have to decide if they're willing to fight for their democracy. And that's why when I hear people say like, well, you know, I was really a Sanders guy, or, oh, Biden is not progressive enough. I'm like, this is all nonsense. It's complete garbage. Either you want to win and have a chance to make positive social change, or you're willing to let Trump and them run the country, right? You get to choose between incremental progressive movement forward, which has been created epic results over the last 40, 50 years, or you could let the Nazis run the country. See where that gets you. And it's in the hands of the American people.
Wow. So, Derrick, we're going to come back after the break, and I can't wait to hear what more you have to say regarding the voting and AMP Global. Stay tuned.
So I started taking my music and adding my own spin to it. And it was like, I don't smoke wedu, apollo sumongme, kakalika smo mama koko dene tom lemlemle. I don't smoke wedu, apollo sumongme, kakalika smo mama. How do you put out a vision of what you want to see so that other people will accept it? And the thing that I was saying yesterday is that in order to make that argument the strongest it possibly could be, we need to literally shift our positioning as artists, as executives, as educators, as administrators, as lovers of the arts. We need to shift our positioning. You see, what we do is not simply about creating better artists. It's about cultivating better people. And because I did have the good fortune to have parents who were very supportive of me as an artist, not supremely so. I'm not going to lie about these people. They supported me playing music for a hobby. It's wonderful and a good thing, very healthy, before you go to medical school. So I was a kid, I would go around and play people's instruments at their homes. And just have this great idea of like, oh, I'm learning and learning and learning. And then they're like, okay, maybe we'll get him some lessons. And then I got a few lessons and I kept learning and learning and teaching myself instruments and writing songs and all this stuff. And I come on like, Mom and Dad, I wrote a song, check it out. Rappity rap, rap, rap. They're like, it's very pleasant. It's not Mozart, but it's cool. Why don't you go practice that Beethoven piece? So basically, they wanted me to have a certain form of expression. And I started to realize that that form of expression was more powerful than perhaps my parents understood. When I find your place, high among the stars, in that distant space, I know who you are. And if the hands of fate have left 1,000 scars to hide your lovely face, I'll know who you are. I've heard them say that life is like war, and in the end, our argument is very simple. Very, very simple. What we need to do as Americans who are for the arts is to shift our positioning and not to present ourselves as people who are in need of help from the broader society. And as you go out to recruit these million members, not to tell them that we need your support, but that our nation needs what we are offering. It is the hope for America. It is the future of America. It is the path, the best path, I would argue the only path. And we're going to realize it sooner or later. Our job is to help it to be a little bit sooner. In that distant space, I know who you are.
Wow, wow, wow. Welcome back, Derrick Ashong.
Hey, Boosie.
You know.
Yo, that video, I've literally never seen that video before. I was like, damn, that brother's on point. Like, yeah, what he said. I have never seen that. I remember that day. That was a decade ago. Wow.
Wow. But you see, I was going to tie it into the take the mic back, you know. I mean,
Yes.
it is amazing how you're doing what. Let me basically tell you this. I mean, Take Back the Mic Africa is and also Take Back the Mic generally is not only a testament to the various artistry throughout the continent, and in this particular case with America, it galvanizes the power of the people around music and lifts their
Yes.
narratives and defines their truth. Music has always been at the forefront of activism. Political movements can influence music and drive artists to jump the gap between political activism and the gap and pop culture. Yep. So talk
Yes.
to us about that.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So I love that you bring that up. So Take Back the Mic
It's
is a
basically
movement.
a tool for unity. Music as a tool for unity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when we came up with the idea, the concept of Take Back the Mic, it was based on this idea that, you know, for certain communities, people will come and tell you a story and it's always a little bit off key. Like they don't represent you the way you might want to represent yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
particularly for people of color, of the African diaspora, and what have you, there's always somebody coming with their interpretation of who and what you are. And it's for this happens to all kinds of folks around the globe. And yet, when it comes time for you to say who you are, you might express it differently, but maybe you don't have access to the means of production, distribution, amplification of those voices, of your voices. And so what we did is we looked and we said, hey, this right now, we're seeing the first generation in human history that has both the talent and the technology to speak for itself. So we should take back the mic. Take back the mic and let a generation speak for itself. And that's what this is all about. So Take Back the Mic, we just launched the app, which is a beautiful place where artists, creators, and consumers, fans can connect directly to each other. You know, right now, if I put a video up on YouTube and I got 10 million views, great. When I come with the next video, how do I reach those 10 million people? You can't. Facebook and Google will tell you how many watch, they'll never tell you who they are. In Take Back the Mic, you can build a direct relationship with your audience. And we
With
think
your
that that can be
audience. Can you also
extraordinarily
encourage them
powerful.
to vote?
Oh, you can absolutely encourage them to vote. You can put out whatever message you want to. Once you know who the people are and you're in dialogue, not just the usual media model, which is broadcast, we push it out and hope it sticks. Even with digital media, yeah, we push it out, but the numbers, the data, that's the social media platform. You, the creator, you don't know. Our philosophy is like build that relationship, have an ongoing relationship, understand who your people are. And as you understand them better, they will also understand you better. Then when it comes to them to say like we're going to mobilize to the voting booth. We're going to mobilize for our environment. We're going to mobilize to clean up our communities. We're going to mobilize for peace. Whatever it is, we can do it together. And the idea that, you know, art and politics is separate, I think is also a very strange way of looking at things. Because if you look at any political movement, whether it's religious, whether it's fascist, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's progressive, or it is authoritarian, they all
Mm-hmm.
use music. Either they
Mm.
find songs that reflect what they think, they commission them, they pay for whatever. You know, you got terrorist groups out there making music videos, whether
Yeah.
they're white nationalists or, you know, Wahhabist, Islamic fundamentalist
Bob
terrorists,
Marley.
whatever it may be. They're all using
Mm.
art to reach people because art speaks to your soul. And the question is, what are we putting into our soul? Are we putting in good food for our soul or are we imbibing poison? And what I would say is, I think we're at this moment where if you give that mic to the people, they know what they want. They know what they need. They know when they're eating something that makes them feel satiated and full and healthy and happy. And they should have the right and the ability to speak for themselves. And that is why we
Mm.
take back the mic.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, I mean, it's interesting to see that correlation, and I wish you all the best with that. I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're currently in Mauritius, and as you
Yes.
travel as an American citizen, some people are living out of the country. There are a number of things that could be a challenge. That is voting. So one
Yeah.
needs to at least be able to know where to register, where to your polling stations are, and what to do with the process, or getting in your ballot early, the absentee ballots. What would you tell
Yes.
someone who's
We
abroad like you are?
request your absentee ballots now. We requested ours months ago. You know, even
Mm.
when I was in the States, I would vote on my ballot because I always wanted to make sure in the event that there was something going on that day, I don't know, maybe it was super rainy. What if there was traffic? What if there's an issue? I'll just take my thing and I would usually go down. I was in LA, so I'd go down to Norwalk where you could
Mm.
actually deliver your early vote, right? I say you have to vote early in order to ensure your vote counts because the reality is they're trying very hard to disenfranchise people. And again, if you step back and you look at American history with clear eyes, you'll realize that the efforts to disenfranchise people have been extraordinarily successful for hundreds of years. I mean, when they started the country, only a fraction of the population could even vote at all. Now, at this very day in 2020, 21st century, we're out here still fighting for the right to exercise our most basic of rights as American citizens. It's a shame and a disgrace. But
Yes.
in order to overcome that, we have to recognize what we're dealing with and vote. Vote early.
Yes.
Be strong. You don't have to love everything about the candidate. Trust me, as a person who was born in a society where we were not allowed to vote. I mean, my first ever presidential election was in the United States, not in Ghana. Okay. And you saw what happened in that Florida 2000 election. It was crazy. I think that if you
One vote
have
can make a
any chance,
difference.
one vote can make a difference. And if you get a chance to talk to anybody who grew up in societies where you couldn't vote, I grew up in a bunch of different places, including in the Middle East, where there were monarchies. There was no concept of voting at the time. That your vote is precious, and it's not about getting the perfect ruler. You're not going to get the perfect dictator. So if you throw away a democracy because the candidates were not perfect for you, wait and see what comes next. Things could be so much worse.
Being resigned,
Michelle
being
Obama said
having
it.
a nonchalant attitude.
Yes, and a lot of these kids are too cool for it. I've seen a bunch of MCs be like, "Oh well, I ain't even vote last year or 2016." Some of these guys are like, "Well, I might vote for Trump." Listen, there's no time for that. You have a despotic regime in the United States, and a lot of people don't see it because the media kind of normalizes what these guys are doing. But if you talk to anyone who's lived under an autocracy, they will tell you where the road you're on is leading. You're not going to be happy with the results. American democracy is in the hands of the American people, and this is the last chance to save it. Vote. Vote for Biden. Vote for Democrats. Vote for progressives. If only to send a message to the Republican Party that what is happening is unacceptable. And if they want to be a part of the public sphere and the civic discourse, then they need to be responsible contributors, not demagogues and fascists.
So, Derrick, I mean, you've given us your output, I'll call it output, regarding voting, the importance of voting. Now, I want to specifically also talk about immigrant communities, such as in particular, African community in which you fall under. I mean, you've been ahead of the diaspora curve. Why I say this, you've been involved in different communities since you've lived in the U.S., whether Hispanic communities, African American, Caucasian, different communities. You're like, I would liken you to a global citizen.
Yeah.
When we talk about African diaspora, sometimes before media said focusing on, say, the Black Lives Matters, many people have been like, it doesn't affect me. My kids, it can't happen to my kids. And then they think they're immune to some of these situations. But clearly, they are now beginning to see that, no, once you're here in this country, we're the same. Because back in, I think, like say in Ghana, there's no such thing as you're a Black person. There's no such thing,
No.
So
Yeah.
what's
You're an
your take
African.
on that, and tying it into the voting process? Because sometimes people don't vote for certain things. They don't vote in even local elections because they think it doesn't impact me. It's not for me. They don't participate in censuses because it's not for me,
Listen, this is you raising a great point, Busi, and I will be a little bit maybe controversial. I think that it's not universal, not everybody. I hope they don't come in all lives matter me. I think there are too many people, Africans and African diasporans, who are living as immigrants in the United States and do not respect and acknowledge the reality of the life experience of African Americans. It's different. When I came back to the US, I didn't even really understand what it meant to be Black. I'm African, and specifically, I'm Ghanaian. It is what it is. I grew up in Brooklyn, but I was a kid and I was a child of Ghanaian parents. I had a very clear idea of who I am and what it means. I also had a big emphasis on certain types of education. I didn't come from a culture or an experience where people in my past and ancestors were prevented from accessing education, not able to read or this or la 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 la, or uh, put in circumstances where we're dealing with a constant foot on your neck, preventing you from getting economic and
And please
social and
tie this
cultural
to the
benefits.
elections. Please tie this to the
Well, oh,
elections.
absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because what winds up happening is those black people, African Americans, have been fighting for their rights the entire time. And those are the rights that all of us benefit from. That black people, white people, native people, Latino people, Jewish people, Asian people, everybody benefits from the fight that those folks undertook. And yet, when we get those benefits, we take them on board, and then we don't really look at what happens to the people who made them possible. And it is black Americans, and it's not by themselves. We've been in diasporic dialogue the whole time. You know, Marcus Garvey inspired from Jamaica, inspired people like Kwame Nkrumah, who was the liberator of Ghana and the spark of the African liberation movement. And Kwame Nkrumah went to Lincoln University, a historically black college in the United States, and the African liberation movement helped inspire and spark the civil rights movement in the US. So we are brothers and sisters. We've been in it the whole time. But when we come in as Africans and we think, well, this is not my problem. I'm here to do my job. I'm just trying to take care of my children. Yo, when the cops pull over your kid, they don't care if you from Nigeria. They don't know nothing about, you know what I'm saying, Tanzania. They don't know, they don't care. You're still black. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is understand one another. I'm not going to put that, you know, African Americans have the best understanding or respect for Africans and African culture. But I'm saying that as immigrants coming into the society, we do have something that we can learn from those who have been dealing with the society and have been fighting for these rights the whole time. And we should be building bridges. And we should certainly be voting in the collective interest of the society as a whole. And that has to center around people of color. And the reason is because as long as you disenfranchise somebody, everybody's at risk. White people were standing in front of the White House protesting, were shocked when the police came down there and were beating the hell out of them, knocking them over. They've been doing it to black people for centuries. Why are you surprised? Not realizing that the dehumanization of one can lead to the dehumanization of another? It's important for we as immigrants who know the value of democracy and freedom and expression should exercise those rights to help advance the home that we've chosen.
Yes, wonderful. So what are your recommendations for people? What can immigrants do, diasporans do, or anyone, even friends of yours do? The youth, how would you, what recommendations would you give? Oh, there are two questions here. One, how would you encourage them to go to the polls? Two, how would you tell someone to encourage people close to them to vote? And that kind of thing, as because this 2020 elections is an important election.
Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the play the hits a little bit. And great questions, Busi. I am technically politically an independent. I'm not a registered Democrat, not a registered Republican. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like I'm like coming in as an immigrant. There's a lot of things that you could talk about that let me hey, free enterprise, personal responsibility. I like the sound of that. But when you look at what the Republican Party's actually done, that's not it. There's a heist that is happening. I know what corruption looks like when I see it. And so I am being explicit, even as an independent. I'm telling everybody to vote for all the Democrats. You have to send a resounding message to the entire political establishment that you have gone too far. This is not acceptable for we the people. Vote for all the Democrats. I don't care who they are. Vote for all the Democrats. The point is not that you love the candidate. The point is if the Democrats get swept in on a wave of massive political engagement, then it's going to be very hard for external parties to interfere with the election. It's not going to be close enough for people to marginalize folks and the disenfranchisement to work. It will be overwhelming. And anyone else that wants to come into the political discourse will have to respect all the voters. I'm not saying vote for all Democrats forever. I'm saying vote for all and only Democrats right now. That's one piece. The second piece is we as immigrants, We need to talk to each other, and we need to talk to our people about it. We have to stop being quiet politically, you know what I'm saying, in the background. We don't want to cause any trouble.
Sometimes
I've
it's
just got my
fear.
papers. Me, I'm
Sometimes
just
it's
trying to get
fear.
by.
It's fear. It's
Say that
fear.
again? It's
Sometimes
fear.
it's fear.
And it's a sense of like also responsibility to something bigger. You're trying to send money back home so that your people can make it. And you're going to come out here and risk yourself going to protest and this and that. I get it. But the voting is fundamental. If you don't vote for the society you want, you may not be happy with the society you get. And we need to be talking to each other, encouraging one another. We need to be talking to our friends outside of our communities. We need to be sitting down with our Latino and African American brothers and sisters, with our Asian and South Asian and white brothers and sisters. We need to be talking to one another about why we are voting exclusively Democratic. And I'm straight up, I don't care how nice the Republican you love is. Vote them out. Let the entire party go back to the drawing board and decide if they want to participate in a democracy where all people are included. But if you let it be like a little bit of fascism is okay, you're going to get a lot more than you're expecting. We as immigrants should make our voices heard. We should be the ones to tell people
You
how
want them
things
to
can be.
exercise their civil duty. It's a right. It's not a.
Yes. And like I said, like it's not all, I mean, some of us immigrate to the United States and we're coming from dope, fresh and fly circumstances where we have democracy. But a lot of us are coming from places where the democracy was problematic. And we can see what that looks like. And a lot of Americans don't travel. This is the reality. You know, if you ask me questions, I'll tell you the truth as I can see it. People don't go nowhere. And if they do, a lot of people's out here on a cruise ship, they never see the people in the places they visit. So they don't realize how fragile democracy is, how precious it is. It's the immigrants. It's the immigrants that keep America free. Immigrants, we get the job done. The country has never needed us more, and we need to step up.
Yeah. So in closing, what does the African diaspora grassroots voting mean to you?
It means we stand up. It means we speak out. It means we talk to our friends, our neighbors, our peers. It means we rally one another. We hold hands. We vote early. It means we vote democratic exclusively in this particular election for a strategic reason, to make a statement about what is an acceptable behavior in the American polity and what is not. And it means we activate and we spread the word. Do not miss this opportunity to be heard.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Derrick Ashong, CEO of AMP Global, for sparing time to come on the African Diaspora Grassroots Voting, and for sharing your insights on what we need to do regarding the 2020 elections, but also tying music and with activism and technology with activism, and speaking from the perspective of being a diasporan and what you can do to get the next person next to you besides yourself to go to the polling stations, and also being able to vote when you're out of the country. That is, vote early. And I would like to thank all the viewers for watching this show. I am your host, Busi Matsiko Anden, and I look forward to seeing you next week on Wednesday again. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Jamais, jamais, nous disons stop à la vente de nos terres. Jamais, jamais, ne cédons pas au chantage et belles paroles. L'héritage que nos ancêtres nous ont légué, c'est pas l'argent, les voitures et maisons. Pour assurer la survie de nos familles, c'est la forêt et la terre. Missy et bon, elle est baillon c'est ma eye. Missy bonne ni te heni, elle est baillon c'est ma eye. Et ma kobasia na ton mambo manyoko. Na be café na biko konone, umo somo sangue olia. Toyanaka, obonongo, yo sumise, inundanga, abonisa, sakonane. Non à la vente des terres, non à la vente des terres, non à la vente des terres. Mokatu moti, isunu ni fala, abanisa. Tuyana kobunanga tubunanga salaba. Tuba munu moti, batakaka obusi. Élevons nos voix, chantons sur tous les toits. Demain soit plus clair. Si t'entends ma voix, la voix des sans-voix, ce qu'on a de plus cher, ce sont nos terres. Toyanaka, obonongo, yo sumise, inundanga, abonisa, sakonane. Non à la vente des terres, non à la vente des terres, non à la vente des terres.
Une partie du peuple tout le temps et tout le peuple une partie du temps, mais on ne peut tromper tout le peuple tout le temps. Oui au développement, non à l'exode rural.
Diaspora Banen, chef traditionnel élite, fils et filles, que chacun apporte sa pierre à l'édifice. Mounani Moundamonte. Non à la vente des terres. Non à la vente des terres. Non à la vente
Peuple Banen,
des terres.
tous nous sommes interpellés.
Non à la vente
Soyons unis.
des terres. Non à la vente.
Mon ami petit me partenaire. Mon tatou motif au fond du poids. Mon ami foyer est mort.
remercions le collectif des artistes Banen et son président, Monsieur le Congolais Vincent Olivier, pour sa lutte acharnée pour le réveil de la culture Banen.